So it gives me great pleasure at this time to introduce Julie Clement, our Director of Middle School, who will be hosting tonight's session. Over to you, Julie.
Thank you, Will. Hello, everybody, and welcome to our middle school evening. Our middle school evening we've called Connecting to the Light in the Middle School Child. And you might be wondering a little bit about that title. One of the things that's really important for us at Pickering College is the Quaker values that our school is founded on. And that one of those beliefs is that each student or each person has a light or good inside of them. And that's why we really thought that this would be a great name for our discussion tonight. And because it is something that we focus on, not only from kindergarten all the way through to grade 8, but also at the middle school age group, particularly when they're going through a lot of changes in development. You're going to be hearing about that. It's 3 years of their life, but a lot is happening in those 3 years. And we are focusing on the good inside each of them and how do we develop that during this time. It really is an instrumental time in their development where they are growing into the young adults that they're going to become. And we want to focus on not only about the good that's inside of them, but how they can use that and do good in the world. And at Pickering College, we do that in our Pillar Years. Our Pillar Years program is our middle school program where we focus on 4 different areas of development: wisdom, adventure, community, and freedom. You're going to hear more about that from the people that are here tonight on the panel. So I won't go too deep into it, and we'll come back to that later. But we do have a team with us, and I'll introduce each member who's going to speak in their area of expertise. And then I'll also introduce to you a couple of middle school students who are going to share with you a bit about what is it like to be a middle school student and sort of what is their words of wisdom and their advice, not only to middle school students and what that experience is like, but also to middle school parents from their perspective. So we're going to start with Miss Sugar. Danielle Sugar is our school social worker. And Danielle, I'm going to put you on the spot. I'm going to ask you one quick question. What is your favorite thing about middle school?
Oh, all the changes. Like it's, there's, as you said, there's big changes between grade 5 and 6, and it's really amazing to see them start to find out who they are and figure it out. And I love that. That's probably my favorite part.
Amazing. So I know you're going to share with us a little bit about the social emotional development that happens at that time in grade 6 through to grade 8. So go ahead, Danielle.
Thank you. Okay, so those middle school years. The middle school years are a key development turning point that set the foundation for personal identity, lifelong skills, habits, and values. They strive not only for excellence in academics, but also for the support of students to develop critical social emotional skills that will equip them throughout all their lives. And there's an emphasis on preparing young people for rewarding lives now and into the future. The middle school years are now understood as a key developmental turning point that set the foundation for personal identity, lifelong skills, habits, and values. And the middle school years present a really critical period to invest in young people's social emotional growth. That's when we start to see that change in development. It's so important in terms of fostering their independence. So it's a real balance between the independence that every child must learn. With more freedoms comes more responsibilities. And it gives them the skills that they can choose when and how they can apply them, helping them to develop a toolbox of self-management skills that includes self-control, delayed gratification, and frustration tolerance. And they need to develop these skills essentially for pre-secondary school. It's so important during this time to establish really good routine, teaching and encouraging self-monitoring strategies, and developing strategies that will help to keep them organized. And fostering problem-solving ability. So allowing some independent thinking time after the instructional delivery and encouraging multiple original ideas for promoting creative thinking. This allows students to voice their opinions freely with lots of positive reinforcement. And it creates an atmosphere to encourage individual brainstorming. Also encourage group work, and creates a classroom culture where teachers are not only there to solve the problems, but rather to support the students to help them solve the problems themselves. That is really key. And fostering self-advocacy. This is something that we really really want to hone in on in this area is that self-advocacy is important for students to be able to communicate their needs to others, whether it be to teachers or to peers. So really having them learn that ability to, not just we have a negative word called confrontation, but actually confrontation isn't in itself a negative word. It's really learning how to say, okay, this is what I need, and communicate that. Creating independence in the students, supporting the students to recognize what their own needs are, teaching students how to be their own self-advocate. That's so important. That's a lifelong skill that they can carry with them as they develop, and teaching the students to reflect and assess their own strengths and weaknesses as learners. Building student capacity for social and emotional development. So students are provided with multiple opportunities throughout the school day to practice self-awareness, build self-management skills, increase social awareness, and build important relationship skills. Students are encouraged to learn and use these new technologies, and it promotes both physical, mental, and emotional wellness for all our students here at PC.
And we're about to, thank you, Miss Sugar. I know we're about to jump over to Miss Hamm, who's going to elaborate a little bit further on how some of these strategies are put in place in our classroom. And I know, Ms. Sugar, you did an excellent job of explaining the core strategies that we actually use and implement in the school that are so important also to have those strategies and ideas implemented at home. That idea of creating routine, building independence, helping your child to problem solve. We do that here in the classroom, but it's also important that that's happening outside of school as well. Overall words of advice, Ms. Sugar, for helping to ensure that a student who is going through the middle school years has some balance.
Balance is key for sure. I think it's really about finding that time management, teaching them the importance of time management. I often work with students that will say to me, oh, I'm a procrastinator. And really, I think we as adults are continuously struggling for working towards that work-life balance. And it's really teaching that towards our students as well. Academics are very, very important. Absolutely. We want to set aside time to be able to do that because that's their full-time job right now. But just as we have our own full-time jobs, it's so important to find that balance in terms of appropriate socializing, making times with our peers, making time for our own self-care. We are doing these things as adults and role modeling these to our children. And that's, I think, really important for looking towards that balance.
That's great. And definitely as all of these responsibilities are increasing at the middle school level, it's learning to juggle that balance. That's so important. Thank you.
Yes.
Mrs. Hamm is our grade 6 homeroom teacher at Pickering College. And so she really gets to see our students as they come from junior school with the foundations and the skills that they've learned there, and then develop them into the middle school independent learners. And so Mrs. Hamm, I'll let you take over and share a little bit about what the transition to middle school is like for a junior student.
Thank you, Julie. So good evening, everyone. The difference between the middle school and junior school level focuses on 4 main learning skills. The first one being developing learning independence. So my main goal as the grade 6 homeroom teacher is to provide the opportunity for students to develop into independent thinkers and decision makers. This can be done through scaffolding and framing curriculum content and projects around essential questions in which students are responsible for developing the answers to these questions using knowledge from lessons and life experiences. Throughout the first year of middle school, I work closely with the students to develop these skills through modeling and practice during instruction and through inquiry-based projects. The goal by the end of grade 6 is that students have the confidence in their independent and critical thinking skills to approach future tasks as they navigate through the middle years program. The second key skill is initiative and resiliency. So the shift from junior school to middle school also requires students to develop resiliency and initiative skills while taking ownership of their own learning. We teach them to approach decisions and questions with a problem-solving mentality using open-ended inquiry-based tasks. We encourage students to ask questions, learn from their mistakes, and welcome feedback from both peers and teachers. We create a learning environment that is safe and provides students the opportunity to learn how to be resilient in school and in everyday life. The third transition is collaboration. So in the middle school, we want students to develop an understanding of community, and we develop this community first in our classrooms. We want students to embrace the talents and differences of their peers and understand that collaboration allows students to utilize each other's strengths and differences to work towards a specific academic or personal goal. We teach students how to provide constructive feedback and conference with their peers to improve upon their work. And lastly, we want them to become digital citizens. So our middle school program is a one-to-one technology program that utilizes the Microsoft platform and the Google platforms. And as we know, technology has become an integral part of our society. Our mission is to teach students how to be responsible digital citizens by instilling the importance of positive online communication with peers and teachers and learning how to represent themselves authentically in the digital world.
Thanks, Amanda. I know that you have provided us with a summary of a really, really intensive program that we have at the school to make sure that our students are set up for success. And there were two things that you mentioned that I really connected with and remembered from our own experience with the school is that when our students are working together and collaborating, you talked about that diversity of hearing other perspectives. And one of the things that I think is important, particularly for a middle school student, is to become more aware of the diversity of their world, whether it's diversity through gender, diversity through culture, diversity through religion, and all those pieces that play together as they're working with other students. And so really embracing that diversity is great. And then the second thing you mentioned was safety and students feeling safe. And that is so important from kindergarten all the way through. And creating that safe environment for students to feel like they can take risks so that they can put themselves out there as who they are. Thank you for sharing that transition from junior to middle school. We now have Ethan Bishop. Mr. Bishop is our grade 8 homeroom teacher. And so Ethan gets to see those students that Amanda worked with in grade 6 after they've spent some time developing their skills as middle school learners. And he gets to see them really on their pathway to senior school and how they are utilizing some of those skills. And so Ethan, I'll let you talk a bit about that programming related to our pillar years and the students who leave us to go to senior school and what they're capable of.
Sure, thanks, Ms. Clement, and good evening, everyone. So I was asked to talk about the Pillar Years program and how it culminates with the grade 8 expression of self, which is that last task that they complete as they move on into the senior school. So we want students emerging from middle school to be independent, self-aware, and capable of making the world a better place. As Ms. Clement mentioned, our middle school program achieves this through 4 pillars, and those are community, adventure, wisdom, and freedom. And the pillar projects integrate community, adventure, and wisdom so that our students learn to take a layered approach to problem solving. By grade 8, they know that in the absence of community, our actions won't make the world better, that if we don't seek out adventure, we never grow, and that without wisdom, we don't know where to start. The last pillar, known as the freedom pillar, is the one students tackle when they reach grade 8. This pillar is unique because it combines all that grade 8s have come to learn about adventure, wisdom, and community. It is called the freedom pillar because it is student directed. They can choose any interest that they are dedicated to. As you heard from Ms. Sugar, grade 8s are at a stage of development full of change, where they want to forge an identity. We hope this culminating project inspires them to showcase this identity and gives us a window into who they are outside the 4 walls of our school. We also know that fundamentally, for our grade 8 graduates to be global leaders capable of creating positive change, they need to better understand who they are and what they are capable of. That is why the culminating pillar project, called the expression of self, asks each grade 8 student to consider the questions, who am I and what can I do? In the expression of self, students answer these questions by sharing something they are passionate about and that they have dedicated a significant amount of time to. They then reflect on what this passion reveals about them. Expression of self topics have included journalism, visual art, photography, gymnastics, music, hockey, creative writing, and even outer space. For this project, the grade 8s compose a 6-word memoir that's superimposed on an original photograph. You can see a couple of examples on the slide. Each of the 6 words are carefully considered for how they illustrate their topic and their identity. Finally, in a 3-minute memorized speech, students introspectively discuss how they develop their passion, how it has changed them, and how they can use it to both help others and spark positive change. To give you one example, last year, a young woman in 8B, which is my homeroom, chose the topic of sustainable fashion for her expression of self. In her expression of self presentation in her speech, she told us her journey began when she learned that as a child, her mother's clothes were often hand knitted by her grandmother. Learning this family history made this student question her own shopping habits. She talked about how she would compulsively shop, how she had tons of clothes, and how she was starting to feel guilty about that. Because it dawned on her that beyond the beauty of cheap clothes was an uglier story of waste and exploitation. Feeling that she had a responsibility to do better, she learned how to sew and gradually created a sustainable closet. She even showcased pieces of the sustainable closet in the background of her room as she presented online. The student went on to tell us about how she plans to encourage others to chart a similar path using her influence on social media. Her 6-word memoir, Saving the World Stitch by Stitch, captured the essence of her approach. In celebrating the end of the middle school journey with the expression of self, we feel that each grade 8 graduate leaves the middle school with a better sense of who they are, a confidence in the value of the things they are passionate about, and a belief that they can make positive change.
Thank you, Ethan. This is one of my favorite experiences at the school. And I haven't been at the school long enough to see it in person, but I've been told that in person, in our regular, not sort of restricted settings, we end up setting up these artifacts that students bring to school in a meeting room, and parents are invited to attend, and it's quite a lovely gathering. But the one thing that I really remember in the last 2 years is the way that the students speak with so much passion and confidence about something that's really unique to them. And that really allows them to have that unique identity about who they are and connect to their identity. So it's just one way that we bring that out in our middle school students. I know Ms. Sugar talked about that earlier as well, about that importance of understanding their own unique identity. I wanted to ask, before we jump to our student panelists that are here today, Mrs. Hamm, who sees our grade 6s, what's your favorite thing about middle school?
That how every day is different. There's not one day that's the same. So how like spontaneous the middle school years are. I love that.
Yeah, I think one of the pieces that's really important about middle school is they're not too cool for school yet. That tends to happen in grade 9, where they get a little bit sometimes more anxious. But in middle school here, we really encourage them to be who they are so that they don't get too cool for school, and that they are spontaneous, unpredictable, will say what they're thinking, and that really brings that extra flavor to what we do every day. Ethan, what is your favorite thing about middle school?
I think it's their sense of humor. Middle school students have a really good sense of humor. You can see that illustrated in the pumpkins that are over my shoulders. Some pretty remarkably funny examples of their sense of humor. And I know that sounds sort of trivial, but I do think that translates into an open-mindedness. And so in the same way that they're willing to consider the weirdness or the idiosyncrasies or like the jokes that we tell, they're also really open to considering new ideas. So it's something that goes beyond just laughter, and it's a really unique aspect of middle school.
That is so true. Well, we are going to now introduce you to a couple of students who are currently in our middle school. They're both in grade 8. We have Mika and Bilal are joining us. Mika started with us in grade 7 last year, so she's in her 2nd year with us here. And then Bilal joined us this year, and he is one of our boarding students. So he has a unique perspective on our community through his experience with boarding and Mika as a day student. So we're going to start with Mika. I'm going to ask you a similar question that I asked the teachers, but what is the best thing for you about being in middle school?
The best thing about being in middle school is probably having even more opportunities to try new things and get involved. There are many activities that allow us to take on leadership roles. We also have more independence and freedom than we did in junior school. In grade 8, we have a choice of an elective course. We also get to choose co-curriculars, clubs to join, and committees we can run for a position on. The teachers help us build our independence with the projects we work on by having us develop our own ideas. The supportive teachers are also one of the best things about middle school. They help us whenever we need it, and they're very accessible and flexible.
Thanks, Mika. Can you share with us what elective you are taking right now?
At the moment, I'm taking the art elective.
The art elective. And then Bilal, well, I'm going to ask you the next question, but what elective are you in, Bilal?
Right now, I'm doing the debate elective distribution.
Oh, your sound quality is not coming in so great. Are you able to lean a little closer there, Bilal?
Right now, I'm doing the debate elective with Mr. Bishop.
The debate elective with Mr. Bishop. Excellent. Bilal, in what ways would you say you feel like you are part of a community at Pickering College?
I feel like being part of the college community helps students feel like they belong. And I feel like this is really important, especially when you're in middle school and you're just trying to figure things out. You always feel like you're never alone and you're always working with other people. You kind of feel like you have someone else to shoulder something onto. There's a lot of community events and opportunities to get to know people. And there's activities and activities. That means you're always part of something. And this also helps us feel supported and that we are taking care of each other. Also, in boarding, we have another special community. There's also the associate faculty who act as our faculty heads, and we're always looking out for us. We also have other students in other grades who feel like family members, even though we all come from different backgrounds and different places from the world. We still have a lot of fun together.
Yeah, the community and the boarding is really a global community from different countries. Bilal, do you have a headset with you? Because I think you mentioned to me that you did. Do you want to plug it in before I ask you your next question?
Okay.
Awesome. Maybe we'll help your sound quality get a little better. Thank you so much for that response, Bilal. Mika, tough question. What's the hardest thing about being in middle school?
I would say the hardest thing can be adjusting to the change from junior school. There are a lot of new things, but also responsibilities. It can be tough at first to stay organized and manage your time, but the teachers are help you a lot at the beginning of the year. We also have workshops where we learn skills and tools that will help us with organization and stay on top of our work. Also, when students are having a hard time with something, there are people at the school who can help. We have a school social worker if there is something we want to talk about. There is a learning strategist who works with us at the beginning of the year to develop the learning skills we need and can meet with any student who may need extra help. The teachers were also helpful and flexible while we were adjusting to being new to middle school.
That's great. Change is always difficult, but it's good to know that you feel that you have people that are here to support you along with that change and adjust. Wow. What do you think is the most important thing for a parent to know, a parent of a middle school student?
I know that my parents are probably worried a lot about me being a middle school student. And I think a lot of us are probably worried about disappointing our parents or that we aren't doing good enough. We want to know that our parents love and support us always. And we are always trying to do something on our own for the first time and to be a bit more independent. One thing for my parents, I would say, is probably that they need a lot more patience with us because we are still trying to figure things out in middle school.
Yeah, and you might not know that I'm also a middle school parent, even though I'm a director of middle school. And I think you're right. Patience can be kind of tough. Sometimes we want our middle school students to be exactly like us as adults, but we want them to also develop their own identity. And that takes some patience because our middle school kids might not be exactly like we are as adults. And that's a really great point to mention. And feel loved and supported and try and figure those things out as we go. So we are coming to the end of our session. And I wanted to see, we have some guests that are here tonight. And I wanted them to share maybe one thing. What's the first word that comes to your mind? You can type this into the chat box. We have the chat feature. What is your first word that comes to mind when you hear middle school? The first word. So we'll give them a few moments. And maybe it's a word that we used tonight when we were talking about middle school. What's the first word that comes to mind? We need some sort of like Jeopardy music playing as people are thinking and typing. The first word that comes to mind. Challenging is the word that came through. Challenging. I think if we think back on our middle school years, some of us felt that that was a really challenging time for us because we were trying to figure things out. And maybe we didn't have the most supportive environment to do that in, or we didn't always feel like it was. Challenging is definitely a good one. Independence. Independence is another word that representing middle school. We heard tonight humor. We heard unpredictability. We heard identity. We heard patience. It's quite a diverse set of words that represents our middle school. High energy. Oh yes, most definitely there is a lot of energy in middle school. Ironically, we thought yesterday that they would come in pretty tired from our Halloween weekend, but our middle school students came in pretty wired and ready to go with full of energy. Growth. That's another great word, growth. All great words. And so I'm going to open it. If you have a question, we do have the chat box and you can type a question into the Q&A. If you don't feel comfortable with everyone seeing your question, you can change the setting of the two and send it just to the hosts and the panelists. And it could be a question for a student. It could be a question for Danielle Sugar, the social worker. It could be a question for one of the teachers. And so I'll let you have some time just to type in your question. And then we will see who gets asked a question. Maybe while we wait, Mrs. Hamm, how long have you been a middle school teacher?
This will be my 10th year as a middle school teacher.
10th year as a middle school teacher, 10 years in middle school. Mr. Bishop, how long have you been a middle school teacher?
Been a middle school teacher for 9 years.
Excellent. So we did have a question, 9 years, you two are like running a race almost. So we had a question about how we transition new students to Pickering College. So we do have new students that join us in grade 6, grade 7, grade 8. And so how do we transition someone who's new? And so we actually, it says that we have someone who wants to answer that question. Is that Mr. Wah? Are you volunteering to answer that one?
I wasn't actually specifically. I was handling the Q&A from the back end, but I'm happy to talk a little bit from the intake side that we do within the admission office and the enrollment management side of things. We actually have a number of new parent welcomes that we do typically in the May timeframe. So if you're an incoming family, maybe you've applied already, you may be receiving an offer of admission. You may have already received one. We are in that process now. But what will happen usually around May is all of our new families are invited to a really great welcome session that we do similar to tonight in a way, in that they are age by age in different groups where we invite in our amazing faculty to talk about that transition. And then as we move throughout the summer, we have a number of mailings and communications that will help you to start to feel like you're part of our community. And then, of course, a great welcome in September. Things have been a little bit different in the past 2 years, of course, with the circumstances not allowing as many guests like parents on campus. But I know that we're all very hopeful that by 2022, 2023, things will be returning back to a little bit more of a sense of normalcy, and we'll be able to bring back some of our great welcome events that take place in the first couple of weeks.
And once the students arrive at the beginning of the school year, every year in the first week is our Learn to Learn week. And there's a series of workshops that's done during that time in their homeroom groups. And that's one of the most important times where we focus on integrating new students with students who have already been attending the school. They do team building workshops. Actually, you can see some photos here on the right side. Particularly, you can see that the students are standing on a squared off map on the ground, but they're trying to figure out a pathway through. It's a problem solving activity, and they have to work in a team to remember this path. Mr. Bishop sees and is watching this right now because he remembers his group doing this in the fall. And they do this in team, and that really helps the new students and the returning students work together. That's just one example of one activity that they do that week, but there are many activities throughout that week where they're getting to know each other through that different team building that they're doing. They're also spending time in class doing other workshops. One of the first activities that we did this year was a hand activity where they identified themselves through 5 questions. And then those were all placed outside of actually my office to represent all of our middle school, and the students stand and they look at that frequently and read what other students have written about their identity and see where they connect with other students. So we do a series of different workshops to get to know new students, but also returning students, because it might be the first time that they've had that teacher who's their homeroom teacher. And so we do have to spend time at the beginning of the year trying to get to know each of them and what makes them unique, and then connecting them with other students. We always keep a really close eye on new students to the school. And I think, Mika, you were a new student last year. You would probably, and I know that you very quickly had a few students that you became very close friends with. Maybe you can talk a little bit about what that was like for you when you joined us here in the fall last year.
Well, when I joined, it wasn't very difficult to make new friends because everyone was very very nice, and they were very welcoming. All the teachers and students were happy to talk to the new students and include me in all the activities. And so it was really nice because I felt really included, and I was nervous about making friends, but it didn't end up being too hard. So the transition's really nice.
That's great. And I know you've become really involved in some of the clubs at school. And one of the other important things for a new student is to find the things, whatever it is that interests them, that they connect with, connecting with those people. And we let them know right at the beginning of the year, what are the opportunities for them to get involved, what clubs exist. And that helps them sort of find people who are like-minded among their peers. And so we'll see if there are other questions that have come through. I have one anonymous question coming through that came just through to our hosts and panelists about the uniform for middle school students. Do you like wearing your uniform? Tough question for a middle schooler. Bilal, maybe you can talk a little bit about the uniform and what it means to you.
Honestly, I feel like the uniform is very nice and comfortable. It's also formal wear, so it kind of prepares us for like the future. And honestly, it's one way to like organization for the school, and you know who's who. And the uniforms are just very nice.
Thank you, Bilal. And Mika, did you want to add anything about wearing a uniform as a middle school student?
Well, I think Bilal covered it pretty much, but yeah, like he said, they're pretty comfortable, and it's also nice how we get a PE uniform for PE and stuff, and so we don't have to bring in our own PE clothes. And I especially like wearing those ones because they're very comfortable, and yeah, it's nice.
Great. And one other question for Bilal and Mika. what would be your words of advice to a student who's coming into middle school? It could be one sentence, but what are your words of advice to a new incoming middle school student?
Don't panic.
That's great. Don't panic. And Mika, what are your words of advice?
Like it can be a little tough at first, but it's not too challenging when you get the hang of things, and just ask your teachers for help when you need help, and they're more than willing to give you a hand. So that's all. That's the advice I'd give.
Thank you so much to both of our student panelists and to our other three panelists who were here tonight, Mr. Bishop, Mrs. Hamm, and Ms. Sugar. We don't have any other questions coming through.
I think there's actually just one more, Ms. Clement, over in the chat. Some have been coming in the Q&A and some in the chat. So
problem. The trip about trips at Pickering College. Oh, that's a great question. So we haven't had a lot of our trips over the last 18 months, unfortunately, but we are doing day trips right now. But in the past, we usually do a grade trip with every grade in middle school. And we're hoping to reestablish that once we're permitted to travel. In grade 6 in the past, they would travel to Montreal. In grade 7, they would travel to Quebec City. And in grade 8, they would travel to a small town called Saint-Donat in the Laurentians in Quebec. And our goal of those trips is actually to immerse them in Canadian history, as well as the French language and culture, to get them that experience that they wouldn't necessarily have in this part of Ontario. And then the additional part of that that's really fun is getting to travel with their entire grade and connect with their classmates through all of the adventures that they're having when they're there. So every time we do go away, there is some aspect of adventure. The one in grade 8 is full of it. We are doing outdoor skating in the forest and snowboarding or skiing on the mountains and snowshoeing. It's a lot of adventure and a lot of fun. Grade 7 did a treetop trekking ropes type course in Quebec City when they traveled there, as well as visited many historical sites. And then in grade 6 in Montreal, they also visit a few different sites, including in the past, they've gone to the Cosmodome. They've visited the old part of Montreal. And so they've gotten a little bit of history while they're there. They usually spend some time swimming in the pool at the hotel. Really great bonding experience for our students. This year, we haven't had exactly the same, but because we were trying to do local trips. But one part of our trips, or our program, our outdoor education program, that's really, really important to us at Pickering College, and also really important just for middle school students, is being outside. We go to our school farm. Our school farm is located only about 15 minutes from the campus, and we take our school buses there. And both Mika, Bilal has not yet been to the farm, but Mika has been to the farm last year. And we go there as part of many of the projects that we work on through our middle school programming. It's probably, if you asked students who've been at the school for a while, the one place, if you said, where would you go if you could go today? I bet you a lot of them would say the farm. They've had so many incredible experiences at that location. We learn about the diversity and ecology of the farm. We learn about we do simulations of historical events at the farm. We learn about just survival skills, being outdoors at the farm. And the middle school students, they really thrive out there. It's a great spot for them. I was just there a few weeks ago with grade 7 for science. And we're able to use some technology while we're there. We were doing that to identify plant species that we were seeing that were growing on the farm. And then we finished, of course, with a campfire and roasted marshmallows. And so it's a great place. That's a bit of a summary of some of our trips. We took grade 8 treetop trekking nearby here, not too far away, up near Barrie. So both Mika and Bilal got to go on that trip, had some challenge for themselves, and also got to socialize and support their peers in that trip. So I think that might have been the last question, right, Mr. Wall? I didn't miss any more.
I think that is it.
Amazing. Well, if anyone is here who still has questions that come in and they want to ask, they can either email directly to the admission team, or you can send me an email directly As the director of middle school, I'd be happy to answer any questions you have, or even if it's just a question about your middle school child. If you have questions about them and how you're approaching this time with them, I'm more than happy to take those questions. And so, Mr. Waugh, did you want to sign us off?
That's great. Thank you so much. And thanks for everyone for joining us, for our panelists, for our students, certainly our guests that were able to join us tonight. And yeah, I think as Julie mentioned, we're always happy to keep the conversation going after tonight. If you are, of course, a current Pickering College student looking ahead, you know who to reach out to at the school, and Julie's a great resource for questions. If you are a prospective family or you've recently applied, if you have any questions about your application, you can reach out to our general admission email there, or if you've been in touch with Laura Murgatroyd or Susan Cartwright directly for either an application today or boarding respectively, I'm sure they'd be happy to hear from you. And I guess the last piece is I'll just plug tomorrow night we have our introduction to senior school. So if you are looking a little bit further ahead, or if you do have an older sibling that is looking for senior school grades 9 to 12, certainly be sure to check out that event, and you can register for it the same way that you registered for tonight's. So I think that's everything that I have. So thank you again for joining us, and enjoy the rest of your evening. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everybody, for coming.